Politics have become a pretty hot-button issue when it comes to entertainment. There are those who believe that entertainment shouldn't include politics at all, saying that they use it as a form of escapism, since we're often bombarded with politics anyway in our day-to-day lives, especially in election years, so entertainment is a chance to take a break from that. Likewise, there are people who insist that everything is political, and that not only media should include politics, but has a responsibility to keep people informed, and actively write it into their scripts. One example of this is a new release called Dustborn, a video game that openly embraces its politics. According to the devs, it was inspired by political events from 2016, which they put at the forefront of the writing, like in this scene where they mock those who don't want politics in their media, by having one of the bad guys say it.
You may want to pick a different song next time. Folks in the Republic don't much like politics with their entertainment.
As a result, though, the game already feels pretty dated despite being just released, because it has a complete lack of subtlety. Part of the gameplay is literally to trigger people. I don't think most people even use the term triggered anymore, but yeah. The game was heavily panned almost immediately by gamers, having abysmal opening numbers when it first launched. According to Steam charts, it wasn't able to break 100 concurrent players, and I do think that the game overemphasizing politics was a part of its failure at launch. However, I would personally argue that having political themes in works of fiction is not necessarily the problem, it's more the implementation. Oftentimes in pieces of media that focus heavily on politics, they have a tendency of being really heavy-handed with it, as we can see in pieces of media like Dustborn, but the lack of nuance makes for a pretty frustrating time. Instead of coming off as poignant and deep, it just comes off as cringe. But looking into the game kind of reminded me of a musical I'm a fan of called Hadestown. The stories share a few similarities. Both feature a main character whose voice directly impacts the world around them, both involve traveling through a dystopian dictatorship, and both of them have overt political themes. But I think Hadestown handled those themes in a much more effective way. Dustborn follows a group of renegades traveling across the former United States, now known as the Republic of America, a fascist dictatorship crawling with guards looking for any political dissidents. California has seceded from the Union and is now going by Pacifica, and the goal of the game is to get from Pacifica to Nova Scotia to deliver a package, and they can finally be free to live openly as themselves, all while posing as a punk rock band on tour. Meanwhile, Hadestown is an adaptation of the ancient Greek myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, set to the backdrop of Depression-era New Orleans, with the underworld being represented as a company town ruled by Hades with an iron fist. Eurydice ends up starving to death and then signs a contract to work in Hadestown, realizing too late that she literally signed her soul away to the devil. So Orpheus makes a perilous journey into the underworld to bring her back to the land of the living, but he'll have to face Hades to do so. Dustborn features characters called anomals, who have the power to weaponize words and a technique called Vox. For example, the main character can force people to do what she commands, like if she says to stop moving, they're forced to freeze in place. Or another character who can use her words to change her density and make her stronger, among other abilities. Anormals are also targeted by the fascist government, so they use the power of words to fight their way across the land. And in Hadestown, Orpheus has the ability to affect nature around him when he sings, like making the flowers bloom. Hades, the god of the underworld, and his wife Persephone, the goddess of spring, are having marital problems. The weather is either too hot or too cold, which is causing a famine because crops are failing, and also giving Hades more workers in Hadestown, since people are dying, which he can then use to put to work so that way he can try to make Hadestown as beautiful as possible to impress Persephone, but really he's just making things miserable for everyone. It's a vicious cycle. So Orpheus wants to write a masterpiece that will calm Hades and Persephone and fix the seasons, but Eurydice ends up starving to death while he's still working on it, hence the whole traveling to the underworld to get her back thing. So that's the basic rundown of the two plots. And both of these stories are pretty upfront when it comes to their politics. However, I think Hadestown handles things better than Dustborn, because Dustborn isn't just upfront about it, it basically hits you over the head with it. There's just not a lot of nuance when it comes to this game. It feels like the story here is really just there to support the politics they're trying to speak on, whereas in Hadestown, the politics are there to enhance the story. In Dustborn, the US became fascist because they killed Jackie Kennedy instead of John F. Kennedy. He went on to marry Marilyn Monroe, and then the two of them just kind of turned the US into a fascist dictatorship, which I already have multiple problems with, but also I kind of wish they just used fictional characters instead of real-world people. I mean, what did JFK and Marilyn Monroe do to deserve this? I'm not saying he was a perfect person, but fascist? And they're not subtle at all, going on about Puritans and the woke mind virus and how they're putting stuff in the vaccines. Not to mention the dialogue is pretty terrible. It all comes off as very one-note and caricatures of modern politics. And the way we got to this point feels extremely forced. Meanwhile, Hadestown has an obvious antagonist in Hades, but he's actually very complex. And a fully realized character with understandable motivations, he's not just a one-dimensional caricature. For 6 months out of the year, Persephone has to go to the overworld, but for the time that she's in Hadestown, she's pretty miserable.
That was not 6 months. Better go get your suitcase packed, 'cause it's time to go.
So he tries to make the underworld more like the overworld by adding electricity, so it would actually be bright down there. This is also working all the souls to the bone, metaphorically speaking, but the souls are losing their memories of their time before their death, and even forgetting their names, and no one's allowed to look at each other or acknowledge each other's presence. And this all plays into the politics behind the show. Back in ancient times, they used these myths to explain things that they didn't have context for, like why the seasons change, or what happens after we die. And in Hadestown, they use these myths to explain things like climate change, without directly saying that it's about climate change. Also, Hadestown is building a wall. That's what all the workers are working on. Many assume that this was a Trump reference, but the show was originally written way back in 2006. And was inspired by events like Hurricane Katrina and the BP oil spill. Trump's campaign ended up being happenstance. Fun fact, Shrek the Musical also included a song that was about building a wall, but it ended up being cut because they were worried people would make a connection to Trump, even though that song was also written before Trump's campaign.
I'm gonna build me a wall. I make it 10 feet high. See you later, pal. Bye-bye.
But Hadestown just went with it, not bothering to make any changes to the story. And I don't think they should have to anyway, it's a pretty major part of the plot. And it's implemented really well, it's believable. And there's a whole song explaining why they build the wall and what the point of it is. Or at least how Hades rationalizes it.
Why do we build the wall? My children, why do we build the wall?
The play is a sung-through musical, so everything is sung instead of spoken, so the dialogue is a little bit different from what we are used to. But even when comparing the music, Dustborn still falls flat. And I'm not just talking about the fact that Hadestown won 8 Tony Awards. Obviously, it would have better music than Dustborn. But I mean with how they explain their message. Since both pieces of media do basically have the same message of trying to change the world for the better using the power of words. However, Dustborn's methods can be a bit questionable. You learn new abilities like cancel, which is a direct reference to canceling people, which will allow you to isolate people from their friends and compatriots. On top of that, you can also bully people, which allows you to force people to do something they may not want to do or to make them feel bad about themselves. That's fun. You can also spread misinformation and make people believe things that aren't real. All very questionable behavior for who are supposed to be the heroes. I'm sure the people behind this game see themselves as very progressive, but honestly they're coming off as pretty awful and frankly hateful. Talking about how they're going to replace everyone who's already there, and also saying they're the new porn? I'm not even sure what that means.
Where the Dustborn is sluggish airborne, where the newborn are kind of newborn.
Also, I don't think comparing themselves to an airborne virus is a good idea. Also, they rhyme porn with newborn. There had got to be a better rhyme than that. I know Pax said that no one listens to the lyrics, but I don't think there's really an excuse for these lyrics to be this bad. Since Hadestown is a sung-through musical, the lyrics are really important because not only do they have to sound good, they also have to tell the story and convey the characters. So the lyrics have a lot of weight to them, often having double meanings or foreshadowing future events. And Orpheus uses love songs to get his message across, not bullying. And it's his optimism that sets things in motion. Eurydice has struggled her entire life, which has left her bitter and jaded. She's meant to represent a realist perspective, someone who sees the world for what it is. But Orpheus sees things the way they could be, and he wants to use love to get there. And he does have a positive impact on those around him. Despite being initially skeptical of him, Eurydice comes around and falls in love with him. He's able to rally the people of Hadestown, and even move Hades himself, and the show is very hopeful. Spoiler Spoiler alert for the ending, but if you're aware of the Greek myth, you probably know that this doesn't end well. But even though Orpheus fails to save Eurydice, he is able to change Hades Town for the better, which also means he achieved his goal of bringing spring back. So Hades Town manages to get their message across without sounding preachy or like they're talking down to the audience, or using some pretty questionable tactics like bullying. While I don't think politics are necessary for storytelling, I do think they can be utilized in an interesting and effective way, and I think Hades Town is a good example of that. While Dustborn is everything wrong with politics and storytelling, and hopefully creators can learn from the failure of Dustborn, but that's my opinion. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, everyone. I really appreciate it. Before I go, I want to give a shout out to our members: Tyrant Carnivore, Shiny Orc Boy, General Bolivar, Depth Charge Media, Samaru163, Gabby Hime, Verdant Range, JVR, Phil C, Taylor Ramirez, Equestron, Norman Sweet Cream, Way Beyond Coincidence, Hunter Rose, 80s Nostalgia Guy, Felix Spam, Lucas Geis, Jay Draws, Meowsers, Sky, Philip, Isaac Martinez, Garcia XV Legend, Tobias Weller, Bandito Bane, Mac B909, Crimson Phantom, Dakari the Professor, Owen Wildish, Jin the Goblin, Datadyne Executive, Caleb Nelson, Todd McCaffrey, Killer Bomb. Thank you all so much for your support. If you would like to become a member, you can hit the join button next to the subscribe button. We also have Buy Me Coffee if you want to support us that way. And if you enjoyed this content, you can leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, and that part's free. I'd really appreciate the support. But thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.